Hello! Welcome back to Evil Genius Props. My name is Trekkie. I'll be your monster for today. And what Mike's going to do today is build some puppets. Alright, so what happened was in my last show for 2023, we did Something Rotten, the musical, which has a part in which, during the song A Musical, the couple of puppets from Avenue Q showed up. Now, going to this, I didn't know how to sew, I didn't know how to make puppets, I had no clue how I was going to do this, but I figured it out well enough to make some passable puppets for the two bars that are on stage. Uh, One of them's here. And I kind of really enjoyed doing it. Even though it wasn't easy, it wasn't something I knew how to do, but I figured it out and sort of really had fun with it. And then I got to have a Jim Henson style monster puppet that I got to keep. Anyway, this served as inspiration for me to go ahead and try to make the book that was inhabited by a wizard's soul from the live role-playing game, Critical Role. If you watch that in the campaign 3, there's a part where the parties get split up and some added guests come in, some extra guests, one of whom plays a low-level wizard character who has a much higher level wizard trapped in a book that she stole from a library. And the way it's described by Matt Mercer, the GM, is that it's a book that has like this face that presses out and speaks and does things. And just he described this, and it's stuck in my head as an idea. So I just wanted to see if I could try to make it. And this is sort of almost similar to what I do for musicals or shows, where I don't have a physical image I'm working off of, where I'm not like, okay, recreate that, but I have a text that I'm working from. It's sort of a good exercise in, can I recreate something from the text, from the description, and make it live and make it work. So let's go get started. For this book, we want it to be big because it's supposed to be an escaped spell book. It's supposed to be an escaped spell book. So I needed a large book, 64th edition of Chapman's Piloting and Seamanship. Big old chonker here. What are we talking about? About 2.5 inches or so, a little over. So it's a big old boy. We're going to use that sort of as our basis for the sides. So what I've got here is some poplar. I'm probably going to need to get some more because I don't think I have enough of this just sitting around. But we'll use that, and it's just about the same height. So if I do that and then put a frame and wrap some pleather around that, that should be about the right size. So if I look at that and mark out how big I want these pieces, this will give me an idea of how big the book's going to be. So if I just do these two pieces and do 2 of those and 2 of this size, we'll be good. So let's mark roughly where that is and see how big it is. So if we make that to be 11 inches, do I have 11 going the other way? I do. So I can get 2 11 inches out of this. How big is this one? That's the wrong way. I'll call that about 8 1/4. So if I find another piece this size, cut this to 11 inches, we'll be good to go. That'll be the frame. And then this will actually be able to hold the puppet within it, inside that frame, to have it come out. So we'll mark this off and then make some cuts. So I don't have another piece quite long enough, but I do have this offcut that I just made. And this is all going to be covered up anyway. So let's see just where I can. Okay. Now I've got 2 pieces that are roughly the same size. So I'm going to glue these together, maybe put a screw or something in there to hold these together because they're not quite even. This should be good enough to go ahead and at least do the basis, and weirdly they're not quite the same width, so I'm going to just cheat it to one side and have that be the top. Alright, I glued those up just to get them started here. I'm probably also going to put a couple of screws in here because these are just butt joints and obviously aren't the best, but they'll work for right now. And this isn't going to be holding anything major, just needs to be big enough to have a bit of a puppet in there. So we'll let that dry, and then next I'll put some screws in through there just to help hold everything together. So what I'm going to do is take some 1/8" plywood, and we're going to cut this down and put it around the frame I made earlier, just to fill out sort of to be the book cover, and then attach the stretch pleather to that. So we're going to take these and we'll cut them down here in a minute, but we want to just get them laid out to see exactly how far out we need to cut them. So I want to cut, this is going to be the spine. And then put these here. We don't want to extend these that way because the book cover doesn't go past that. But if I put these flat with that, it extends out about 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to mark where these end and then use that to extrapolate out from there. And then we're going to do the same thing here in terms of how far out it's going to be. So we'll put it right against the side. Okay, back to the bandsaw. I'm gonna go ahead and glue these pieces down to help make out the frame here. And that'll be basically like the book cover. And put something on the spine to hold that out. All right, so there's our frame glued up. We're going to cover this over with pleather, and hopefully be able to stretch the puppet through the middle. That's gluing up. Let's work on making the mouth. And I'm just going to use one of these guys. It's a bendable shape maker. It's not the smoothest thing. In this case, I want to flatten out the front of the mouth. Normally with the puppet, you make a sort of a half circle, but because we want this to sort of push in through the book, I don't want that to be too much of a point. So we're going to flatten it out a little bit. But the nice thing about using these guys is that then it's repeatable. So I can set it once, draw it, and come down and do it again. And then just take that back over to the bandsaw and cut those out. Saved you the trouble of listening to the bandsaw, but there's our mouth. And what we're going to do is put some tape on the back to hold those in place. And then we'll put some sort of strap, perhaps elastic. Just this duct tape will work really well as a hinge, considering we're going to put, this won't be the only thing holding this in place, but we'll use that for our hinge. And that's just your puppet mouth. And we'll put straps, I think, on the underside to help work. But there's our mouth. Last time I made some puppets, I used some green open cell foam and basically made a skull for them, like these. And that worked great for those kind of puppets, where we're going to cover the skull with fabric. But for this kind, where we want that to push sort of through and actually like create the face on the other side, I'm going to go with something a little thicker. I'm going to go with some EVA foam. These are just some scrap pieces I had. Probably enough to be able to make like lips, nose. The description has his eyes sort of closed, like so squinted that you can't actually see. So it's sort of maybe do cheeks and like hollows for the eyes, and then maybe with some foam clay make sort of the eyes look, but then have that push against the pleather there. So we use this and make sort of basically the interior of the face around our little mouthpieces here, and go from there. So I've got some half round EVA that I bought, and we're gonna first cut this to length this way, and then I'm gonna split it in half to serve as sort of the lips. Just because we're coming in through another material, I want those to be maybe bigger than I would normally. All right, we'll let that dry and come back to it, because that's the best way that contact cement works. We'll just let it get dry and then stick it together. So we'll move those off and take some of this. Let's see. What do we need? We need a nose, maybe some cheeks. So we'll take this triangle and we're going to fold it, and then maybe trim the sides to get it flat, and then we can stick that onto something. And what will happen is we'll have sort of a 3D nose on there. Okay, so we've got the face. We're going to take the nose. It's not gluing together very well, but I'm going to smooth out the edges here so that I can apply it to the face plate and sort of have it be angled, but have that be flat. So one of those fun times where there's a whole lot of black dust about to be coming out. Take off the watch. Let's go. I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and clear that off, and then apply some more stinky glue. So what I'm doing now is I cut out sort of an eye shape, and I'm going to do another one and use that for the basis and apply some foam clay to sort of make it look a little bit wrinkled. So this isn't going to be the final eye shape, but this will be sort of enough, and then smooth it out on top with some foam clay to make it look more like the sort of the squinted eyes. All right, so we've got the eyes cut out. They're a little bit thicker than I like, so we're gonna again break out the rotary tool here and just take some off the edges. Maybe I will sort of angle that a little bit to make them be a little more rounded, and then it'll be a little bit easier later on. All right, so I went ahead, and the way this was coming out, just went ahead and cut the slits for the eyes. And now he's starting to look like a face, though he's got no head, but that's okay. So we're gonna let this all finish drying up because this is still kind of tacky. Still kind of tacky. All right, so we'll do that, and then the next step is going to be seeing how well this will work with the pleather, and hopefully I can sort of attach it to the high points. So then whenever it sort of rests like this, and then as you push it forward, it molds to the face. That's the plan anyway. We'll see how it works out. Actually, what we're going to do real quick before I do that, I'm going to clean up the sides of the nose a little bit. It kind of smushed as it glued on there, and now
doesn't really stick out much higher than the eyes. So I think we're going to trim down these sides just a little bit with the Dremel. All right, that looks a little better. That makes it, we'll see how this works with the pleather. So this is the back of the head, and to get those mouthpieces to stay, we're going to cut a little bit of elastic to glue on there. We're just going to use some super glue to attach these. Which piece was this? And now, it's so much easier to talk. Wah, 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 wah. Ha ha. Put down some 4-way stretch pleather. And I went to buy it and basically took all that they had left. So I actually got it at a discounted rate. So take that and this is just going to be a test piece anyway, but see if that actually cut. It did not. I'll try it again. Then when it doesn't work again, I'll get scissors. Yep, we'll get some scissors. And then just to test things out, what we're going to do is clamp these onto here just to see if the face part works. Try to pull it taut here. Okay, it's not working too badly. Just do this a little bit at a time, just stretching it out. I don't want it to be too taut because I want it to stretch when the face comes up from underneath. So for right now, the glue's still drying on the face, but we'll come back in a little bit and see how that works out. So there's our box, and this is the top part, but I think I'm actually going to go ahead and do this on the bottom as well. So I'm going to cut out these pieces of thin ply and put them along the back to be our back cover. The other thing I need to do is take this squared edge, and this is our sample piece. Book spines aren't usually square like this, so I'm going to put probably some XPS, some pink insulation foam, as the back, as the spine here, and then do some of the foam clay as the binding strips. So that's what's next. So I'm going to take some of this pink SPS foam. This is basically exactly the right size. I'm just going to cut it down to the width here, so this length, and then shape the edge a little bit to just shape the edge and make it rounded. All right, I'm going to cut that down real quick, and then we'll come back over and shape it. Okay, and that's cut, so we're going to move this out of the way because I don't want to get foam on it, unnecessarily anyway. And so this is essentially a wood rasp, but I found it's really helpful for just taking off large chunks. All right, since this is going to just be on the back and just going to be on the back over here, we don't need it to be perfect because it's going to be covered up with the vinyl. We just need it to have a little bit of that rounded shape. So that's good. We're going to go ahead and this has to finish drying, and then we'll be good to go with the next steps, which is going to be some more of the wrapping the whole thing in the pleather. So what we're going to do is, I noticed, did a little bit of testing with this guy on the stretch pleather. I mean, it's not actually stretched tight yet, so it's not completely accurate, but we're going to go ahead and maybe work a little bit more on the eyes and fill those out. So I'm going to use some of this foam clay, and I think what I'm going to do is give him not quite an eyebrow, but more of an eye socket, so the eyes sort of pop out a little bit more. And just going to roll this just like you would with your Play-Doh when you were a kid, or if you're, you know, me last week. And I think one other thing I want to do is cut the slits on the eyes a little bit more, which is always a fun sentence to say, but I want to open those up a little bit so that that gap there is a little more noticeable through the pleather. Okay, that makes that a little bit, that gap a little bit bigger, while still looking like sort of just squinted eyes as the description was. So, clay needs to dry, glue needs to dry. We'll come back in a little bit. So I'm going to glue this piece of foam onto the back here. So we're going to use some of the Gorilla Glue, just that expanding foam kind of glue. I said we're going to use it just as soon as some comes out. Come on. Yep. Now, rather than use an actual clamp on that, I'm going to get some tape, which would have been smart to have ready. And we'll tape that on. I don't want to use a regular clamp because it will compress the foam. And because the Gorilla Glue is expanding, it will fill in that part anyway, so I don't need it to be as tight. I just need to sort of stay on there. Now we just need everything to dry. Everything's glued, dried, declamped, detaped. The next step's really just going to be applying, I think, our cover and see if that'll work. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure if basically, my question is if I need to cut the mouth or not on him. Because without it being attached like that, it's not going to stick. But if we stretch it out and then apply the face, but does the mouth need to be cut so that it can open its mouth? But we'll also figure that out and wrap the edges here with the pleather. Glue those down. Maybe hot glue just to start. I don't know, I need to figure out how to best hold that so I can pull it tight to check out the face part. But that's the next thing to figure out. Kind of has eyebrows now. So I think maybe the easiest way to lay this out, not necessarily the best, but maybe the easiest, is let's lay out our fabric. Let's find our edges here. All right. And come over, wrap our corner. Okay, and just tiny clamp that in place. Oh, that didn't work. Try again. Tiny clamp that. And then pull this over. So then roughly right about here, is where I'd want to cut that. And that gives me plenty of extra that I can cut along. Now, my scissors aren't down here, so we'll be right back. Back with scissors. I'm actually cutting it kind of close now, but I assume that as I stretch it, as I actually apply it, I'm going to stretch it more so I can cut it kind of close now and still have plenty of come back to that in a minute. Next thing we want to do is on books, they have those sort of ridges along the spine. That's actually how they sew the binding together. So we're going to model that out with some more of the foam clay. And similar thing, we're just going to make some tubes. And you can do these either singly or in pairs. I think we're going to do pairs. I just like that look better. And the nice thing is, because again, it's going to be covered over by our fabric, doesn't need to be perfect. Probably if it needed to be perfect, I wouldn't be using this kind of clay, and I wouldn't be doing it this way. Instead, what I'd probably do is do something that was more extruded, or even actually use twine or something that had a consistent size to it already. I think we'll do 2 up there and then 2 down here. All right, we'll let those dry up. And in the meantime, I will think about our pleather and the best way to get this on there. So quick update on the puppet idea here. And the original idea was to have it so like the book cover was just flat and then the face would pop out, like so you couldn't see it when it wasn't there. Just not sure that's working. So I think what I'm going to try to do instead is maybe attach the material to the puppet face and then put it on, so you can just sort of see the puppet face all the time, but maybe push it out, or even just use it in the book as a puppet. Either way, it's a slight change. What I want to see is if I can attach the material to the puppet's face and sort of still get that look. We want it to actually still look like a face. So I'm going to play with this a little bit, maybe use some light double stick tape, not the heavy duty stuff, but like the stuff that comes with plastic on your windows or whatever, and just tape that down as a test to see if that works. Because then if it doesn't, this doesn't stick well enough that I have to worry about getting it back off. I'll just sort of pop it right back off. So we'll see if this works and see how well that does. That's not looking great, but let's see what happens if we put it in here, and maybe if we can stretch it out a little bit, because this is a stretch fabric. Probably I won't be able to do the mouth as is. I might have to do that as 2 separate pieces. Grab some of these small clamps. The tape just isn't holding up to when we stretch. I think I might even just try to cut a sample piece, not redo the whole face, but do like the eyes or something. And see, I might end up doing the face just separately and then attaching it. Do like a front panel with the pleather and then wrap the rest of it. And then I can cover up this joint where the fabric would meet up. I guess you call that a seam. Over here to hide that it's a separate piece from the rest of the book. But I think if I maybe try that and just cover the face a little bit more like a traditional puppet, but leave all the extra around the edges, that might work out. So we'll come back and try that.
All right, just a quick status update on where we are with our book puppet here. And the book frame, actually, I feel like it's coming out pretty well. We put the pleather over it, and this isn't stretched, obviously, but it fits. It looks bookish, and I'm happy with this part. The part that has me worried is the puppet that was initially supposed to sort of just pop straight out of the book, so you wouldn't see it at all, and then would pop out and there's the face. That's giving me some issues. So here's what I think we're going to do instead. I have the materials, if I need to just do the whole puppet part again. Not a problem. So this is sort of, if I were to have, this is just a test to see can I just sort of attach it permanently. And I don't think this is bad. This isn't working by itself though. And what I had done was put just some double stick tape on it in places to try to hold the pleather down and see if it would work. And that's just not holding well enough. So I did a test piece yesterday where I sort of quick carved an eye and attached it to a nose piece and then used contact cement to attach it. And that seems to have worked pretty well. Let's see if we can get there, where you can sort of see some of the shapes coming through, and it holds reasonably well to being stretched. So here's where we are. I'm going to take the basis for our puppet and just contact cement over the face, and take the material that we have cut for the book already and see if I can stick that on there and get it to work. Normally with contact cement, you'd sort of let it dry before you try to stick anything on. We're just going to go ahead while it's wet. That gives me some time to reposition, sort of get things down into the folds, and then see where we are. I figure even if that fails, I will have learned enough to be able to do it again correctly the next time. So what we're going to do is try it with this one. If this just utterly fails, I have the materials, I've got extra foam, I've definitely got plenty of pleather to just redo the whole thing again. And having figured it out once will go a lot quicker. And honestly, this is the part of prop making and making original props that I enjoy. This is the part that's more fun for me, is the problem solving aspect of it. Figuring out what's going wrong, how do I fix it, how do I get it done? And that maybe is one of the key things that you need to do if you're doing props for a show or for yourself even, is, okay, here's where we've run into the problem, here's how we fix it, and keep going. In this case, we're having to roll with the change from the original idea, which may not have been easily possible, if at all, and just keep going to get a produced item that we can use. So that's what we're going to do next, and then we'll see how that turns out. If it works out, great. All I have to do then is attach the pleather to the book and do some stuff along the edges and some decoration on the pleather. That'll be the easy stuff, I hope. So we're going to do this next. I want to be sure to get in to these sort of little crevicey areas in here, because I want to be able to stick material to those to be able to get that little bit of definition from it. All right, now instead of waiting for this to dry, we're going to go for it. So I think what I'm going to try to do here is, there's some areas where
there is sort of these little gaps coming in. I might be able to just snip that off, or even slice it as like a relief cut and then glue it down, and it won't be super noticeable. And this is just going to be the initial covering. We are going to probably do some airbrushing over top of this just a little bit to highlight some changes and highlight a few things. But honestly, I'm not hating this. We'll let that dry and see where we come out. All right, so here it is dried and sort of clipped on to the front. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I might see about making some relief cuts in some areas and try to maybe get it down and then close those up and see how we look. I also had a thought that if this doesn't work, maybe the way to go is, instead of making this faceplate curved, just make the whole inset here be flat with the face on that, so then it just pushes up through that. So we'll see about that, but first let's try this. Like I said, we'll try and make a couple relief cuts in here. Okay, this is not near sharp enough. Let me see if I have a sharper replacement blade here somewhere. Well, managed to not get the right size, so it doesn't fit in my handle. Let's see if we can maybe get that with a little bit of super glue just to hold its position. So I think what we're going to do here, and this is going to be another one of those like, well, let's see if this works. Slice open the mouth area, and then what we're going to do is put on the puppet part on the inside, line the mouth with more of the pleather. Okay, I'm actually happy with that. If we sort of roll that over and put a piece on the inside there, this hasn't ripped, which I was concerned about. Haven't worked with pleather very much, so I wasn't sure if that was going to pull it open. I think I can still close it, but also open it. Yeah, I'm happy with that. All right, now before I glue this part down, let's do the inside with some more of that pleather. I went ahead and flip this open. We'll go ahead and run a bead of super glue for the top of the mouth, right on the lip here. Nope, not big enough. All right, so that's how it looks now with that. None of this is attached yet permanently, but I like that. All right, let's let that all set up. Then I think what we want to do is we're going to put our glue around the edges and start gluing down the outside. I might do a little bit more work on this part, but we'll see. Okay, so here's where we are with our book puppet, Dynios. And I think I'm happy enough to try that and actually attach that onto our frame here. So I'm gonna take off our clips, put these, keep these handy. And what we're gonna do is put some more contact cement on this part to start with, and just the frame bit right up here, and glue that on. Once that is set up, I will come back over on the underside to get this wraparound with some super glue to cover that up. But for right now, we'll start with just some contact cement along the outside rim here and see where that gets us after that. And like I said, if this is completely just, I'm not happy with it, I have another idea ready to go, and am willing to just sort of chalk this up to learning experience and go again with the new plan. And I'll be happy with that if I can make it work one way or the other. At this point, even if I'm okay with this, I might try the other method just to see if I like it better. You can never have too many creepy book puppets, I say. Was talking with my daughter about this, and just a lot of this build has to do with just sort of how my mind works. In that, I heard the description of this book that would pop out a face and speak, and the reaction of the other players of being creeped out by it and surprised at first. It just really kind of got me. And what I wanted to do was, okay, how do I make that work? And what do I want out of that? Like, how would I do that if I were asked to? And so I went and just sort of had this idea in my head, and I couldn't, for lack of a better phrase, get it out of my head until actually after I had tried it. I needed to see if it would work. I needed to see if my plan here was viable. If I was, for some reason, asked to make this puppet, make this book as a puppet, I guess, could I do it? Would my idea work? And to a certain extent, the only way for me to figure that out was to do it. So here we are. And I'm trying it out. So far, so good. And my initial idea of making it so that you didn't see him until he popped up didn't work, but that's okay. We gotta roll with it. So we'll see how this all works out in the end, but I'm happy with the process so far. And like I said, I mean, it's just problem solving for me. Does this work? Does this not work? So just gonna keep on going with it and see where we end up. So the glue on the front's dried. I've also went ahead and glued the back. I'm actually going to cut a slot in the back for the hand to go through to work the puppet. But the next step is going to be to glue down these edges and try to avoid gluing my fingers together with super glue. Quick lesson I learned. There was on the pink foam over here a spot where some of the glue had dragged over onto it. And it was not a big deal, but there's a little bit of a hole. So I'm like, Turns out that contact cement will melt XPS foam. Not terribly surprising, as just about seems like everything will melt XPS foam, but this is good information to have. This is just a test piece to make sure that that's what happened. And that's a pretty significant hole in there. So something to learn is don't use contact cement on XPS foam. So what I actually did on the spine was just use some wood glue, which is PVA glue. I was going to use Mod Podge, but it turns out I'm out. I'm not out. What I have is dried. So what I'm going to do now is these little rolled edges to make the sides. I'm going to go in with some super glue and glue those edges down. And then once that's done, we're pretty much to the point where I can start just doing decorative touches. We'll do some paint on the front and maybe clean things up there a little bit. Do some decorations around the front. It's described as having runes around the edges, so we'll do some runes. Maybe do some stuff on the spine, and otherwise just generally make it look more like a fancy wizard's book than just a collector's edition of the Da Vinci Code. well, I got glue on my fingers, but I didn't glue them together, so I'll call that a win. Let that dry and set up, and then we'll come back and, like I said, do some decoration. I think what I'm going to do is I've got some thin brass that we're going to lay along the edges here. And then do some maroons on the inside of that. And we'll give Dynios here himself a little bit of a cleanup and some paint. So here's where we are. The book has got a nice little face on there, but we got some edges that have some crimps from the little clips there. We need to trim off the edges and a couple of little things like that. One of the things I wanted to do, book like this probably would have actually been chained. It's hard to understand now, but books were valuable, even in the actual Middle Ages, and a magic book from the Cobalt Soul would be even more valuable than that. So it would not be surprising to have a chain attaching it to the shelf. And the way books were stored then was actually like this, so it would be chained and then you would just open it on the shelf. So I printed off a chain, but neglected to consider how to attach that. So rather than deal with Fusion 360 or Tinkercad or anything like that to design my own, I found these that I already had in my shop here, and it's actually like a cable clip. So you'd put this to hold your Cat 5 cable or phone cable, if you remember what that is, and you would just do that. So it turns out this is just about the right size to fit. The only problem is I'd kind of want it to be this way so I could attach it on the back, and it's a little bit too wide, so I'm going to cut off the edges here and make it a little bit narrower, and also take out this part where it says GB 1/2. So it's a tool. Time to break out the Dremel again, and we'll clean this up and then be able to attach that onto the back and clean that up. What we're also going to do is have some brass banding, and we're going to put that along the edges here. Haven't said if I'm going to have one over here, but definitely have it on the outsides, and so sort of just hold all that together, cover up these parts, but also it would add some appeal to the book, visual appeal, of make it look more important and fancy. So I think what I'll do is I'll start off with the outside edge and see how that looks, and then decide if I want to put one up along here first. But next up is trimming this piece down to fit along the back, and I think it's really just take off these parts where it sticks out past the circle. Let's clean this up a little bit and take off some of the top there. I'm going to change bits real quick to do that with. All right, let's see how this works now. Clean up a little bit more, but in general, it's a lot better. All right, so I've trimmed that down, and now it fits rather nicely with the chain. So I'm just going to attach this into the back here, so that then basically he's got a little bit of a tail. And there we go, nice little chain tail for him. And we'll paint that up to make it look a little more metallic and aged, but for right now, we're good. So what I'm going to do with this is, rather than leave the edges straight, I'm going to cut them on a 45 to basically miter them, and then that way I can do them and have them join up. So I'll start off with that and maybe leave the top and bottom ones a little bit longer, just to see if I'm going to cut that straight or not on the other side, if I'm even going to have it that one. But first things first is cut this at 45. All right, now we'll put this like this, and that makes up our bottom. So like I said, I'm going to cut this side over here a little bit long, so if I want to miter it to add in a piece up here, I can. I'm just going to go ahead and do that again on the top, and then we'll come back and glue that all on. Okay, and there it is with the 3 sides. I think I do want that 4th side just to help sort of even it out, look more appropriate to have like the cover have it and then the spine. So put another piece here. I do have another piece of it, but that's the basic idea. All right, so I've gone ahead and cut this out, this brass border, and tried it on a piece, scratch piece, to make sure that it would actually stick with just super glue. Working really well. Don't want to put too much because apparently it squeezes out a little bit. So we're going to clamp that, glue that and clamp it, and then come back. I initially said that I was going to paint the face and sort of use that to call out highlights and shadows. I did some tests on that as well and just did not like the results. The black wasn't really noticeable at all. I mean, I did use that to cover up some places where the foam was showing, but it wasn't really that much of a difference. Like most you could see would be a difference in sheen. And then I tried some grays and metallics and just did not like those results at all. Even tried just, could I maybe do some lines just with a Sharpie or something? And yes, but I still don't like the results that it got me, so I'm just going to leave it as is and do these, the brass bits here, and come back after that and see where we are. So we're going to use some of the CA glue. Use some little spring clamps to help hold that in place. I guess not that one because I threw it on the floor. All right, we'll let that dry. We have the brass all attached, so that's most of the big stuff is done. Now it's just sort of down to the fun appearance stuff. So we're going to go through and cut off the excess pleather, cover up the wood. Actually, that might even look pretty good already as a book. Just use the grain of the wood there. Maybe covered up on the underside and the top though. Paint his tail, which I probably should have painted before I attached it, but I wanted to make sure that would work, and now here we are. That's okay. You'll also note I've got this on a piece of foam, so that way I can flip him however I need to, and he's not going to get, no, it's sitting on something hard. So I can push on this, and then the connection point for the tail here just sort of sinks into the foam. But we're going to do that, clean that stuff up. Like I said, I'm not going to do paint on his head there. Paint this up, but overall, nearly there. I think I'm going to put a spot of super glue on these corners, sort of tack them down a little bit better. All right, here's my dilemma for the back. Should this lip be vertical or horizontal? I feel like maybe horizontal is the better option. I think I might put a couple of just little relief cuts. All right, let's talk about the book pages. Honestly, I feel like this, especially from a distance, already looks enough like sort of pages. I'm just going to leave that as is. The top and the bottom, though, I cannot do that with. Now, there's a number of ways I could do this. depending on how good I want it to look, really. If I was making this as a commission for someone, I would take a piece of faux H paper, fold it over, maybe even again, glue all of this down, slit this edge, glue this together, and then like cut thin strips of it, and then glue those down individually. So there's individual parts, like pieces of paper there. It'd still all be one piece, but it would look like you'd actually see the different edges. If I was doing this for stage, I would literally just sort of paint the pink foam probably. This is going to be somewhere in between those two. What I'm going to do is take, again, this H paper and sort of cut it to fit, glue it down, and then I think I might actually even just take, that's a pen, that's a pencil, and just do very thin lines. And specifically a pencil, not a pen, because I want them to be light, because they're just supposed to be like shadow showing, as opposed to full-on difference, hard lines. So what we're going to do is take this H paper, cut it to fit, glue it to the top and the bottom. Two and a half inches, which I think is what I actually set out to do, which is impressive. I'm not usually good at that part. So I'm just gonna hit this with some PVA glue. So it could be some white glue, or in this case, I'm gonna do a light coating of wood glue. You know, might work better actually. I've got some Mod Podge. Very old Mod Podge, but Mod Podge nonetheless. Well, I had some Mod Podge. Trigger warning, that's nasty, but it seems to have solidified. Back to the wood glue. I don't just want to do a thin coat. I don't really want it to like soak through the paper or anything. Go ahead and put a clamp on the foam part over here. I'm not going to do it hard, just enough to kind of keep it pressed against there. I don't actually want to compress the foam. And now we're going to do an airbrush coat on this guy. Actually, before I do the painting on the chain, the description was that it had runes and symbols all along the outside. So I pulled up and found some alchemical and other just sort of runic symbols. I'm going to put some of those on the periphery here. And they're described as being in silver. I'm just going to use a silver Sharpie. Not really going to have anything in particular, but there might be a few, if you know them, specific little Easter eggs. Probably not going to do a whole lot of the actual giant runes, because these are a little more complicated than I'm able to really do well. But these are the only ones I could actually find from Dungeons and Dragons. Happy with those. Starting to look a little more like a book and a little less like a weird puppet. Now we'll flip it over and do the paint on the tail. Keep calling it the tail. It's chain, the lock. So I just stuck a piece of the scrap paper that I didn't use underneath. The first step is just to paint all of this just black. That should be the hardest link to paint. Alright, we'll let everything dry. Then I'm going to come back and touch this up with some rust. It's maybe some gray, depending on how much gray is not just already poking through. And then maybe some silver, but not a lot. We want it to look more old and rusted than we want it to look clean and shiny. But we'll step back and let all this dry and see where we are. So what I've done is I went through and hit the chain with some rust-colored airbrush paints, both just a flat and then also a metallic. I do like that the metallic had some flake in it and gave it some shimmer. I don't like that that flake then clogged my airbrush and I had to clean it, but uh, it's almost a little too shiny now for being, aged and ugly. So I'm gonna weather it a little bit with some acrylic paint, just sort of a burnt sienna and what color is this? Light oxide red. Well, red oxide would be rust, so that's the right color. We're just gonna mix a little bit of those and some water. Really just want to tone this down some. Still maintain that rust look. Just gonna hit this on. Not even gonna hit everywhere, because it'll let some of that metallic come through still. I just don't want so much of it. So yes, to recap, we printed it in gray, we painted it black, we painted it rust color, and now we're going back over with more of that, and maybe even do some more black. Weathering is all about adding layers and age. Age, unless you're weathering, doesn't happen all at once. So it's all about layering. And that's me bumping the camera. It's nice because I printed this with the FDM printer as opposed to the resin printer. And that sort of gave me these layer lines that I didn't do a whole lot to take care of and remove. So that'll sort of be a good place to pick up some of that weathering. I don't want to take out all of that, but I do want to take out some. And if I take out too much, I go back and I put some more. Sort of dab a little bit. Just let that finish drying. So that's kind of our last steps on this. We'll flip it over and take a look while that's still drying. So that's pretty much what we're going to call done. There are some places that I would like to fix that I just didn't quite, I don't like this little seam here. Some things that maybe just didn't quite work out the way I thought they would. I'm okay with it. This is a good first effort. It's a good sort of proof of concept. And I think what I've really learned from this is how I want to do it again. And I think I will try to do it again before San Diego Comic-Con. And if I don't make it so the face disappears, which is what I was trying to do here, then obviously that didn't work and I had to change horses sort of midstream. If I know about that going in, it's going to be designed differently and I'm going to make it look different and I'm going to do the puppet part differently. So I think this is going to be ripe for a redo, even if it's just this part. Just wrap this around, like cut this, wrap the existing parts around, and sort of put a new puppet part in the middle. Because lots of this are really good. Lots of this I'm happy with. But this is something that I think I'm going to come back and fix later. But for right now, that's probably going to be it. That's what we're going to go with. Like I said, there's a lot that I do like, and if I was doing this for, say, a show, like a play or musical, I would call this great and be happy to move on to the next item. Because I'm doing this sort of for my own personal enjoyment and nobody's paying me, there's no set time frame on it. I'm going to come back and do this again, I think. I'm going to redo the puppet. So look for that video to come in the future. But in the meantime, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, be sure to like and subscribe. If you want to see any other prop builds or suggestions, throw them in the comments below. Otherwise, be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.